Every image of an alien you have ever seen in your life is almost certainly wrong. Not a little wrong. Completely, fundamentally, scientifically wrong. And the reason that matters is not because the truth is boring. It is because the truth, according to real scientists and real evolutionary biologists, is far stranger, far more unsettling, and in some ways far more terrifying than anything Hollywood has ever put on a screen. What aliens might actually look like is not a question of imagination anymore. It is a question of physics, chemistry, and the cold, indifferent rules of biological evolution. And those rules point towards something most people are not prepared to hear. Stay with me, because by the end of this, the word alien is going to mean something very different to you. Let's start with the most important thing to understand. Biology is not random. Life does not just grow into whatever shape it feels like. Every single feature of every living thing on Earth exists because it solved a specific problem. Eyes exist because detecting light helps you survive. Legs exist because moving across solid ground requires them. A brain exists because processing information quickly gives you an advantage. Evolution is ruthless and precise. It keeps what works and throws out everything else. Which means that on another planet, with different gravity, a different atmosphere, a different star casting, a different kind of light, evolution would be solving different problems. And the solutions it arrives at would look like nothing we have ever seen. Take gravity first, because gravity alone would reshape an alien body in ways that would be deeply disturbing to look at. On a planet with significantly higher gravity than Earth, the rules of structural engineering apply to living bodies just as brutally as they apply to buildings. A tall, upright, two-legged creature like a human being would simply collapse under its own weight. Bones would shatter, muscles would fail. So instead, evolution on a high-gravity world would produce something short, broad, and dense, with thick legs spread wide for stability, and a body built low to the ground to reduce the mechanical stress on its skeleton. Scientists describe this body plan using the same physics principles an engineer would use to design a building in an earthquake zone. Now imagine meeting that thing for the first time. A creature that looks nothing like any animal you have ever seen, built for a gravity that would crush you, looking at you the way you might look at something impossibly fragile. And that is still a relatively close comparison to life we understand. Go the other direction, to a low-gravity gas giant, and the body plan changes completely. In an atmosphere with no solid surface to stand on, legs become irrelevant. What evolution rewards instead might be something that floats, drifts, and moves through gas, the way a jellyfish moves through water. Enormous, balloon-like, almost transparent structures that rise and fall through pressure layers in an atmosphere hundreds of kilometers deep. Scientists have genuinely proposed this as a plausible body type for life in gas giant environments. No skeleton, no limbs, no face in any arrangement you would recognize. Just something vast and almost featureless, drifting through clouds the size of continents. But here is where it gets even stranger, because the star a planet orbits doesn't just determine how much light it gets, it determines what kind of light its life evolves to see. Our sun produces most of its energy in what we call the visible spectrum, which is exactly why human eyes evolved to detect those specific wavelengths. That is not a coincidence. That is evolution solving the problem of where most of the useful light is. But most stars in our galaxy are not like our sun. Most are red dwarf stars, dimmer and cooler, producing the majority of their light not in the visible spectrum but in the infrared. On a planet orbiting one of those stars, eyes would not evolve to see the colors you and I see. They would evolve to detect infrared light, heat radiation, the invisible glow of warm bodies and warm surfaces. Those eyes would have to be large, far larger than human eyes, to gather enough of the dim light available. They would look different in a way that would be immediately, viscerally unsettling to any human being standing in front of them. Not because they are hostile, simply because they are built for a universe that looks nothing like ours. And all of this still assumes we are talking about carbon-based life, using water as its solvent, the way every living thing on Earth does. But scientists now take seriously the possibility that life does not have to work that way at all. On a moon like Titan, Saturn's largest moon, the surface is covered not in liquid water but in liquid methane and liquid nitrogen. In those cryogenic temperatures, a completely different set of chemistry becomes possible. Silicon, which cannot form the complex molecules needed for life in warm, water-based environments, becomes a viable alternative in extreme cold. Life built on silicon-based chemistry would produce organisms with rigid, mineral-like body structures, not soft, wet, recognizably biological shapes, but things that might look more like crystal formations or geological structures than animals. You could walk past silicon-based life on Titan and simply not recognize it as life at all. Now here is something that should genuinely sit with you for a moment. We do not actually need to travel to another star system to find a creature that thinks in a way that is completely alien to us. We already share this planet with one. The octopus diverged from the evolutionary line that eventually led to humans roughly 550 million years ago. Our last common ancestor was something barely more complex than a flatworm, which means every piece of intelligence the octopus possesses, it evolved entirely on its own, independently, from a completely different starting point. And what evolution produced is something extraordinary and deeply strange. An octopus has around 500 million neurons, which is a significant number. But 2/3 of those neurons are not in its brain. They are distributed throughout its 8 arms, each of which can taste, touch, and make simple decisions independently, without waiting for the central brain to respond. It does not have one intelligence. It has 9, loosely coordinated, working together, in a way that has no real parallel in any vertebrate animal. Scientists have observed octopuses twitching and flashing rapid patterns of color across their skin while they sleep, which strongly suggests they experience something like dreams. They can solve complex puzzles, recognize individual human faces, and use tools. And yet they cannot see color in the conventional sense, despite being masters of color-changing camouflage. They appear to detect light through their skin directly, sensing the world through a system we have no equivalent for and no real framework to understand. Scientists who study the search for alien life point to the octopus, specifically as the most useful model we have for what non-human intelligence might look like. And the octopus is a creature we share a planet with. Imagine what 500 million more years of evolution, on a completely different world, under completely different pressures, might produce. There is a powerful scientific principle that cuts both ways through this entire conversation, and it is called convergent evolution. The idea is that evolution, despite its freedom, keeps arriving at the same solutions independently, across completely unrelated lineages. Eyes have evolved separately at least 40 times in the history of life on Earth. Wings evolved independently in insects, dinosaurs, birds, and bats. Intelligence itself, the real, flexible, problem-solving kind, appears to have emerged completely independently at least twice, in vertebrates and in cephalopods like the octopus. Cambridge paleontologist Simon Conway Morris argues that this pattern is so strong, so consistent, that even on alien worlds, evolution would converge on similar solutions. Bilateral symmetry, sensory organs clustered near a central processor, some form of limb or appendage for interacting with the environment. His argument is that physics imposes such strict limits on what works that the universe effectively has a limited toolkit, and life keeps reaching for the same tools no matter where it starts. But other scientists push back on this, and their counterargument is the most unsettling part of this entire conversation. They argue that Conway Morris is making a very human assumption, that the solutions he calls universal are only universal for life operating under Earth-like conditions, solving Earth-like problems. Change the pressure, the temperature, the chemistry, the gravity, the light, and evolution has an entirely different set of problems to solve, and it might arrive at solutions so different, so far outside any framework we have, that we would not even recognize what we were looking at as a living thing. Here is where that leads. Scientists working on this question have proposed what some of them call the indistinguishability thesis, the idea that a civilization sufficiently advanced, one that has had millions of years longer than us to develop and modify itself, might have changed so completely that the boundary between organism, machine, and environment no longer exists in any meaningful way. A species that can rebuild itself at the molecular level from any available material no longer has a fixed body. It could exist as a distributed network woven through the geology of a planet. It could spread as self-replicating patterns of information through a star system's magnetic field. It could be something so completely integrated into what looks like a natural environment that every instrument we have would simply read it as background noise. Not because it is hiding, but because our entire concept of what a living thing looks like is too narrow to detect it. And this is not purely hypothetical, because we already have a real example of life that most of our planet's history would have failed to recognize. For the first 2 billion years of life on Earth, every living thing was microbial. There were no eyes to see with, no brains to think with, no shapes to recognize. Life was chemistry, invisible, distributed, without form in any way a later observer would instinctively call life. The universe spent most of its biological history producing things that would have looked like nothing to anyone searching for life, using the same assumptions we use today. So here's the real question this leaves you with. We have spent decades scanning the sky, listening for radio signals, looking for planets that resemble ours, searching for biology that resembles ours, and we have found nothing yet. But what if the reason we have found nothing is not that nothing is out there? What if it is because the universe is full of life that looks nothing like what we are searching for? Life that floats through gas giant atmospheres, life built from silicon in oceans of liquid methane, life so ancient and so changed that it exists in forms we have not even built the concepts to describe yet. We keep looking for something familiar in a universe that has had 13 billion years to become something we have never imagined. And maybe the most terrifying thing about what aliens might actually look like is this. We might have already seen them. We simply had no idea what we were looking at.